Hello and welcome to the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I'm joined back again with my co-host Bryan Smith. Bryan, we're looking at some actual minor league baseball to talk about. I mean, we started the podcast back in, I don't even know when this launched. Was it November? Probably November or so.
Yep.
And we launched and had no actual baseball to talk about. We were talking about prospect lists. We were having interviews. We were doing all sorts of off-season stuff. But man, it's April now, which means we have minor league baseball to talk about.
Well, it's funny. We're recording this podcast like 20 minutes after the big league Cubs just lost 7-6 to the Reds in like a really frustrating game. So it's truly our first time recording with just like baseball frustration ringing in our ears. But the nice thing is we're going to be talking about a team that doesn't have any frustration with it, which are the 3-0 Iowa Cubs. So, I'm happy to leave Chicago behind and take a little trip to Iowa here.
Yeah, really. I mean, yeah, that's all we have to talk about in terms of minor league baseball is the Iowa Cubs. But you guys knew that out there listening. Iowa Cubs started on Friday night. They had their opening night, and then we're going to get into some other lower level affiliates between Tennessee, South Bend, and Myrtle Beach later this week. As you guys are listening to this, if you're listening to it later than when the podcast drops, you might already have some other minor league games going on. But today, this episode is going to drop on Tuesday, April 4th, which means that we get to talk about the 3-0 weekend from the Iowa Cubs. And man, it was offensively about as good as you could have written it up, right?
Yeah, I mean, last year I think the Cubs minor league squads came out a little slow offensively, and so it's nice to see, the AAA team is just out ready to swing the bat. I think the wind was blowing out in Des Moines for a large part of the weekend, and so, it was definitely an offensive environment, and the guys took advantage really well.
Yeah, so I think that it's probably best. We're going to talk about a few guys here. First, we're going to talk about the Iowa team, and then I want to kick it at the end of the episode over to you, Bryan, because you just recently took your annual spring break trip down to Arizona, and so you got to see some prospects in action down there. We'll get to that at the end, probably do a little bit of rapid fire of what you saw down in Mesa. But we'll probably start off this episode with a couple guys that aren't technically prospects. I know this is a prospect podcast, but the Cubs have two guys in Iowa that still feel pretty prospecty. I don't know if you feel the same way, but to me, they feel prospecty, even though they've exceeded rookie limits at the big league level. And that's Christopher Morel and Nelson Velazquez, who both had huge weekends at the plate for the Iowa Cubs. Let's actually start off with Christopher Morel, because they both have really particular circumstances as to why they're in Iowa right now. And with Morel, he went 4 for 12 this weekend at the plate for Iowa. He logged a double, a triple, and a home run, which is, he's just always an electric factory on offense and on defense. He played center field, right field, and third base. I don't know what the order was, but he started at all three positions, at three different positions this weekend. And it was exactly what you kind of want to see from Morel starting off the year in Iowa, right?
Yeah, made a really nice play at third base. I think it was the first game going in on a ball. And then, you see a little bit of the power, you see a little bit of the speed. It's really great. What we love about Christopher is that sort of versatility and the fact that every day he can sort of bring excitement to the game he's playing in. And he's certainly doing that. And, I do think it was probably hard for Chicago fans to read what was happening there and not miss him too much in Chicago over the weekend. But I think it does make sense why he's in Iowa for the large, in the broad scheme of things. I don't know if it made sense to me. I don't know what you think. Just during this time where Seiya Suzuki's out, should he have gotten that spot?
Yeah, I think that if I were the person making the call as far as who's playing right field with Seiya out, I'm honestly probably going with Nelly with Velazquez, which we can get into. But yeah, because I think I'm more okay with Morel seeing getting more accustomed to that utility role, playing every single day, playing different positions. I love him at third base. I've loved him at third base even as he struggled in the big leagues last year with that arm slot playing third base. But I still like him at third base. But I've said for so long that his value comes from playing third base, and then playing center field, and then playing right field, and then playing second base on Tuesday, and then playing shortstop for the first few innings. It's like that's where he gets his value, and I still really believe that. He just needs to work out some things, and I'm okay with him being in Iowa. I would have been okay with the Cubs choosing to start him in the big leagues too. I think. For Morel at least, I think it's going to be different as we talk about Nelly, but with Morel at least, I can kind of see what they're trying to do with him.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing to me last year when he was in the major leagues was the first half that he was in Chicago. He was one of the best 2-strike hitters in baseball. I mean, the damage he was doing on 2-strike pitches was like essentially, I think it was Aaron Judge 1 and Christopher Morel 2 for like his first 6 weeks in the majors. And then when it flipped about as hard as you could imagine, because, those last 2 months, basically, when he got to 2 strikes, it was pretty much a guaranteed strikeout. And so when the extremes are that significant, I do think it just raises so many questions about, okay, what's real and what's not. And when those questions exist, and I think that's sort of a little bit why Matt Mervis ends up in Iowa for the same reason, that little bit of doubt, like, is what we think about this guy definitely who he is? And if you don't have that answer real firm, then you got to go prove it for a month.
Yeah, I feel like his situation the first half of the year last year, like that 2-strike that you kind of laid out, was out of the ordinary for him. I mean, like obviously out of the ordinary because for anyone to be Aaron Judge 1, whoever else 2, like that's shocking, right? That's jarring. But it was also out of the ordinary for him, just like even if he was putting up like kind of average numbers in that department. That would have been surprising. So, I think that like where he will ultimately thrive at the big league level is like being exactly what we like about Christopher Morel, right? It's like that really strong arm, hitting laser beams when he makes contact with the ball. It's that value. It's like it's the Chris Taylor light version. I've said that, like I think that Jimmy and I talked about that a lot on Growing Cubs, was that description of Christopher Morel. So right now, I mean, I'm loving being able to watch him. Like that, the Iowa roster is loaded. The Iowa lineup is loaded, and to have Christopher Morel leading off the game for the Iowa Cubs is a pretty intimidating presence for the opposing starting pitcher.
It's also, I think, telling that he is leading off, because what it tells you is they want to get the most amount of plate appearances for him as possible, and that they really want to try to convince him to go to the upper end of his patience range to draw some walks and stuff. So there's some mental gymnastics I think they're playing with him there by putting him in that role, in addition to just let's get you as many pitches as you can. I will say that, while I also like him as a utility option and like him bouncing around, I would like this stint in Iowa to be pretty third base focused, because if you look at the major league roster and the chance that he has to get, 30 games in a row where he plays, it's going to be if that third base situation completely falls apart. So if the questions about his defense are there after a decently to not decent performance in the majors last year, then get him as many innings at third as possible, get that confidence back to where it was dating back to like 2019. And I think that's a better use of time than constantly sort of bouncing him around at the Iowa level.
I can get down with that. I think that makes sense. Where I think the way to look at that, like from that perspective, is I think he has potential for third base to be his best position and bring a lot of value by playing third base.
Yeah.
But I think he already plays like a decent outfield. Like I think he can already right now play a good enough outfield, whereas third base, I think he can play really strongly defensively at third base potentially. He's not there yet though.
Yep.
That's a good point. I want to transition over to Nelly because you mentioned the right field thing, and I tweeted out a couple of days ago. It's a perplexing situation for me, the way that the Cubs have handled Nelson Velazquez, where last year he was up with the major league team from, I think, June 20th, June 19th, it was mid to late June through the end of the season. And there were weeks there were week stretches where he would get a decent amount of playing time, but like by and large, most of the season last year with him in the major leagues was like not consistent playing time. It was It was a start here, a DH position here, a pinch hit position somewhere else, a few off days in a row. Like, it was just not consistent in any way, shape, or form. And he spent the entire year at the big league level from June on, where I think that he could have gained value from being in AAA, playing every single day as he was 23 years old at the time last year. So now you got this year where Seiya Suzuki is out with an injury, and there's a very clear, you got Miles Mastrobuoni playing right field for the Chicago Cubs, right? There's a very clear opening in the outfield to play every single day in Chicago. Now,
zero right fielders on the roster. I mean, basically just 2 outfielders on the roster, right?
Exactly. And whether Nelly's ready for that at the big league level is a different story, but he can get that consistent playing time at the big league level right now until Seiya comes back, and then he can go back down to AAA if need be. But
and it's not even a question. It's not even a question if he's ready, right? It's like, is he going to be okay for 9 games to fill in? I mean, that's really all you're asking. You're not saying like, is he ready to be a major leaguer for the rest of his career? No, that's not what we're asking, and we're not even suggesting that. I think both of us just think if you don't have a right fielder and you need 9 games, then you have a guy on the 40-man roster who had experience like playing sometimes, not playing sometimes last year, and a guy who, played in the World Baseball Classic some, has had a pretty good spring at ramping up. I was at a game in Arizona where he walked off a win in the 9th inning. So, he's obviously had some good swings down there too. I'm with you. I think that he over Morel, over Luis Torrens, over Mastrobuoni, I would have carried him, and I probably would have gotten him into about half the games while Seiya was gone.
Yeah, and all he's done down in Iowa is he's gone 6 for 13 over the weekend. He's raked. Had 2 doubles and a home run. I don't have the numbers pulled up exactly, but I know most of his hits, most of his at bats have ended with a rocket off the bat. He's had multiple 105 miles an hour plus hard hit baseballs, because we do have that data now, which is terrific. I mean, that's so fun that we have StatCast, Baseball Savant data for minor league baseball for the Cubs system, which is going to be, so much fun throughout the entire season. But to see that immediately with Nelson Velazquez, nobody has ever accused Nelson Velazquez of not hitting the ball hard. The dude hits it so hard when he makes contact with it.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a 109, he's got a 106, he's got a 105. I mean, he's doing exactly what you're saying. I mean, he's just, getting it on the screws.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to cover with the 2 non-prospect guys?
No, and I mean, I think I would just say it's important to say like, they're non-prospects by definition, but they are still guys that are, top 20 young players in this organization that really could have really solid major league careers. And so, I hope that as they fall into this little sort of nexus between Chicago and Iowa, prospect and non-prospect, that they're not forgotten in the times where they could be really useful.
Have you seen, I think the baseball or the Cespedes Family Barbecue got whatever their name is now.
Yeah.
This year, I think they've done it last year too, but this year they did instead of like a prospect list, they did like a top players under 26 or something like that, which is kind of a unique way to look at it, because like prospects graduate from prospect status, but they still bring value. Like, they're still valuable as young guys on a major league roster, or young guys exceeding rookie limits. And so, like, I think that Morel and Nelson fall into that category big time. So that's just fun.
Oh, actually, I was going to ask you one question. So Mastrobuoni has a rough play in right field on Saturday for the big league Cubs. And, I think a lot of people were wondering about, they were wondering a lot, should he dove for the ball? Would that have made a difference in the game? But the question that I was really curious in my head, like, it's impossible to answer, but I'm curious what you think. Does Nelson Velazquez catch that ball? I don't think it's close to a guarantee either way. So I'm curious where you would land on it.
I don't know. Honestly, I'll say yes, but I mean, like, what we're shooting at. I think that Nelson is a better defender than. I think long term, I don't think he's going to be a great defender out in the outfield. But like right now he can go out there and get it a little bit. I mean, he's got a strong arm, but like also like he's got some speed on him. I think he would have got it. I think he would have got it.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you?
I mean, I don't know. The best plays I remember watching him do were always going backwards. I don't have a
That's
lot
true.
of plays in my memory that are going forwards and making great plays, but that's not to say that, he's incapable of doing it. I also don't think I got enough of a look this spring. He's a guy, his minor league career is almost defined by every year his athleticism seems to be in a wildly different place than the year before. I mean, some years he's been really athletic, some years it's dropped as like sort of he's been more muscular and a little more lumbering. So, it's hard to tell, but that's something I'm going to watch for in Iowa to see how he plays defense, because it would almost make me angrier in retrospect to think about the fact like, oh, he could have helped actually, keep you in a baseball game.
Yeah, I'm actually like, now that you say that, I'm kind of racking my brain for like bring back the memories of like specific Nelson Velazquez plays in the outfield, and I'm continuing to picture him playing center field, going back to right center, right?
Yep.
Like going to his glove hand side in center field. But yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's a fun exercise. All right, let's get the MASH being MASH, because he led off the season with a 5 plate appearances, 5 times getting on base in that first game of the year, which kind of he took over Twitter on that night, right? I think like prospect fans and major league fans were going absolutely nuts, as Eric Hosmer is not performing well to start off the year. Meanwhile, Matt Mervis is going off and having a 5 on base night. So far this year in 3 games, he's 3 for 10. He's got a double and a home run. Both of those were in the first game. He's got 3 walks. Like I said, on base all 5 times on Friday. He came out the gates hot, and it makes me so happy that he came out this way. Like it's. I think that if he would have gotten up to a slow start, regardless of how long that slow start lasted, if it was a weekend, if it was a week, if it was a couple of games, whatever, I think that immediately questions would have gone to, was last year fluky or flukish? You know what I mean? No matter how long that like rough stretch would have lasted. So the fact that he got off to a hot start is always comforting. Yeah,
I mean, 3 walks on the weekend, I think is a really big thing, because that's one number I think that's going to be really important in getting him to the major leagues, is if they feel like he's going to come up and see enough pitches to be successful. Only struck out 3 times. I think 2 of those were on Saturday, which is another key number. But yeah, I mean, how just perfect to come out of the gate on Friday and just do what he did, which was, smoke a ball for a double, get on base 3 other times by just doing stuff, and then of course the home run and off a lefty. I mean, the guys. Oh man, if we do this in 3 weeks and it's anything close to this, then you and I have to be leading the pitchfork mob to get him to Chicago.
Off a lefty, you say? I was told otherwise. I was told you couldn't do that. No, I think that honestly that was a big part of it, though, for him to do that off lefties. I mean, that first game, I think all 5 plate appearances were off lefties.
Yeah, and then I believe the first 2 on Saturday were as well.
Yeah, so I mean, we know that's going to be huge for his development, still ongoing in AAA. So yeah, man, I love to see that, and the home. So I think that the double that he hit in that first game, actually, technically, because we had the StatCast data, traveled further than his home run. But I mean, he was turning on pitches. I think one was off of a little slider. And then the other one was off a fastball, which is obviously terrific to see with him.
The nice thing about Matt that I appreciate is that he will sometimes cheat and really be looking to homer on a pitch.
Yeah.
And it was the weekend in Des Moines to be doing that with the wind going out. And that really speaks to Chicago being a potentially really good home for him, because there's a real difference on the days where that wind's blowing out to right. I mean, go for it, cheat, and you got a power alley in right center to go get, and I think it'll suit him really well.
It's funny because you can like clearly see him doing that. Like in his swing. It's not like it's not like a Javi Baez, like, when you could see that Javi Baez was like going for like trying to hit a ball 500 feet.
Right.
It
Yeah, he's
doesn't
not
look.
swinging harder. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like a different mindset, and I don't know how you can see a different mindset, but like when you watch his at bats, you can see that.
Well, Matt's power really comes from like catching the ball early. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's pull power because he's catching it early. He's taking advantage of sort of getting his launch angle by getting it earlier out in front of the plate. And so that's, I think, the best way to tell is if he's swinging and missing because he's way early on a pitch. That's an example of like, okay, he's cheating a little bit trying to catch it early.
yeah, yeah. All right, I've got on our note sheet the dumbest like little headings I've ever seen. So I have slaughtering baseballs. He's your boy. I mean, I think he's a lot of people's boys, but it's good to see him making his AAA debut, right? Like this is his first taste of AAA action. And this weekend he went 4 for 13 at the plate with a couple doubles, and he was driving in runners left and right. He drove in 7 on the weekend. And man, it's fun. Again, another situation a lot like Matt Mervis, right? Where he comes out of the gate hot. It's good to see him, like, it's not fluky, dating back to last year,
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's worth pointing out though, like Jake Slaughter does not have to be in AAA. I mean, the Cubs had Esteban Quiros, who they traded to the Phillies, and part of that is because they decided Jake Slaughter was ready. Levi Jordan starting the year on the developmental list. Like those two guys could have very easily pushed Jake Slaughter to AA. I think I was even sort of projecting that in my last guess at how the rosters were going to line up. So I think that tells us that Slaughter won his job in AAA. And when I was in Arizona, for instance, like I saw a AAA spring training game, and he played the first 5 innings, and Chase Strumpf played the last 4. And it really did sort of feel in watching that like, okay, he's past Strumpf in terms of at least like how the big league team is viewing players in terms of their readiness for the major leagues. I think they think that Slaughter's closer than Strumpf to the majors, and it's great to see him winning a job and also now starting to prove that he does belong.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good example. Because I also have my little roster projection spreadsheet. I don't feel as confident as you do in sharing it on social media. I don't know. I went on Danny Rocket's show on the Ranchers Roundtable, and I got to call you a nerd on that because when I went on, Danny pulled up one of your like tweets, one of the pictures of one of your roster projections, and I was like, who is this nerd making this? Little did he know I also have the same exact thing. I just haven't shared it on Twitter. But on my projection, I did the same thing where I actually had Chase Strumpf projected for Iowa, and Jake Slaughter projected for Tennessee. And you're right. It's obviously it's the opposite here because essentially they're playing the same position, right? I mean, they're both second baseman, third baseman. Probably I'd have to look at their ages exactly. What Strumpf is probably a year or two younger than
yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
So it kind of lines up well in that comparison there. But yeah, he looked really good this year or this weekend. Really did not look intimidated or out of place or anything like that. But you wouldn't really expect that from Jake Slaughter. I mean, he is like a dirtbag in every sense of the term. You know what I mean? Like in the best way possible.
Yeah, I mean, had a really nice spring, had that ball against the Dodgers, hit a ball out to dead center, I think 108 miles per hour or something. His dad posted on Twitter. Shout out to Michael. Yeah, I'm really happy to see him continuing the progress from last year because that was such a good story. I mean, if you guys listen to our podcast, you heard Cole Roeder just, gush effusively about what Jake Slaughter did in 2022. So if we see that go as far as get to the major leagues, like you're going to see players around this organization just like go crazy because everybody just is like just so happy with what that guy did last year, just taking the smallest opportunity and now creating like a legit conversation for himself.
So we've had some fun talking about the bats in the Iowa lineup because I mean, and really like that's go look at some of the numbers this past weekend because I mean they put up numbers. It's more than just those guys, these 4 guys we've talked about here. But we got to talk about actually I got a couple kind of downers here in terms of the arms at Iowa The first of which I do not, Brian. I'm catching you off guard a little bit here because I don't have it on the note sheet. But it's because he just posted on Instagram, literally as we're sitting here recording this, to make it official that Ben Leeper is out for the year. He posted on his Instagram that he's out for the year with arm surgery. And I just, because I saw that he posted that, I think that it's probably worth discussing here a little bit, because that we have been so quick to bring up Ben Leeper as a guy that is a stud out of the bullpen in Iowa, could make an impact in Chicago this year. And especially because of that skill and that proximity to the big leagues, I thought it was probably something we should address, at least to a certain degree. Yeah, I mean, it's tough, man. He was so close to the big leagues here, and he was a part of this Iowa bullpen that was going to be so damn good. I mean, it's still really, really good, but to have Ben Leeper miss this year for another arm surgery is tough.
Yeah, I mean, Greg, we heard about this last week, and we exchanged some texts just how bummed we are for Ben. Ben had Tommy John surgery twice in the past when he was at Oklahoma State. And, to get another arm injury, you don't wish that on anybody. That guy has just grinded back from injuries for so much of his baseball career. He shouldn't be the guy that's asked to do it again. I know he's gonna attack this, and he's gonna give it everything he has to get back to where he is, and we'll be rooting like hell for him. But yeah, such a bummer. And it just makes me think of like that 2021 Ben Leeper season was one of the coolest minor league reliever seasons I've covered. I mean, that was an undrafted free agent in 2020 that basically showed up to Cubs camp like spring training 2021. And he was basically the best reliever they had in the organization on the minor league side, like from the day he showed up. And he went from high A to triple A in that season, and very easily could have been called up to the majors. I mean, he was dominating triple A. So yeah, shouts to Ben. We're rooting for you, and, wish all the best.
Yep. Hoping the best for his recovery for sure. Yeah. Cause just one of the most fun pitchers to watch throw, starter reliever in the system, just because of the nasty stuff, and easy to root for guy too. Super easy to root for.
Yep.
All right. Different bad news. Caleb Kilian threw this weekend, and let me pull up. I don't have the line here.
I'll read the line for you. I got it up,
and
then I didn't watch the game, so I'm gonna let Greg react to it. But I'm gonna read the box score here, and it's gnarly. So Kilian got 7 outs, 2 1/3 innings. He gave up 9 hits, 4 of which were home runs. He allowed 8 earned runs, walked 1, only struck out 1, only got 3 swings and misses on a total of 67 pitches, 41 for strikes. So, not getting a lot of whiffs. It was ugly. What'd you see?
So I didn't watch this live. I was out watching some college baseball, getting very sunburned. But I came back and watched the archive of it on MILB TV yesterday. And when I was watching it, it was as ugly. It looked as ugly as what the line looked like, really. The wind was blowing out. I'll lead off by saying that the wind was blowing out at Principal Park like it was all weekend. Made for some crazy baseball games. And so I think that was a contributing factor in the home runs, but that also doesn't take away from the fact that he was giving up some really solid contact. I don't know if you have any of the exit velos over there, but I'll keep talking until you do. But yeah, I mean, he was just the thing with what Kilian was doing on Sunday, and what we saw him do a decent amount last year in 2022, is it reminds me a lot of what we've seen from Ryan Jensen in the past, where there are an awful lot of non-competitive pitches. And when you have those non-competitive pitches, which is a slider that is staying out, a slider to a lefty that's staying outside. It's a fastball that rides way up out of the zone. It's a cutter that's yanked glove side to a right-handed batter. It's stuff like that the swings and misses, the lack of swings and misses, like you mentioned, that's a contributing factor there, where players can just spit on those.
Yep.
And then when you get behind 2-0, 3-1, you're forced to come into the zone. And we saw a lot of pitches in this outing, this very first outing, where he was living with a cutter in dead center of the zone. He was leaving a curveball dead center of the zone. He was putting a fastball just middle in. There's a lot of that. So when you're one extreme or the other, right, where non-competitive pitches or pitches in the heart of the zone, that's not a recipe for success. And like I said, that's something we saw from Ryan Jensen the past few years. And it's something that we're like, Ryan Jensen has always had like the really, really good stuff. I think that we've seen different variations of his slider, the fastball, the cutter, the curve. Like we've seen good stuff from Ryan Jensen. And so like, even when he's doing this, you're like, oh, like he still has good stuff. So if he can just put it together, like he could be really, really good. Caleb Kilian doesn't have that nasty of stuff. Like I think that his stuff got better last year. Like he cranked the fastball up to the mid to high 90s as opposed to low to mid 90s. I think the cutter is legit. He incorporated the spike curve, stuff like that. You know, I think the stuff is better than it once was, but it's not like Ryan Jensen level. So he can't really live off of what he was doing on Sunday and what he was doing last year.
Yeah, I mean, we often think of command as being, you know, just something that you see in the walk column, but what command sort of inconsistency and command confidence can do is it can tell you that like I need to be living in the strike zone. I need to be throwing strikes, and then you groove pitches and they get hammered like they did in that game. Exit velo wise, you know, I mean, not as awful as you might think. I mean, the home runs were 99, 104, 101, and 95. So, you know, hard struck balls, but the wind definitely did play a little bit of a factor. Kilian threw a lot of the hard stuff. It was four seams, sinkers, and cutters basically the whole way. And like you said, I think just a lot of balls that were middle third.
Yeah, and even one of I think it was the second home run he gave up. It was on to me it looked like a curve. I don't know what it was exactly. It looked like a curve. I think Alex Cohen called it a changeup on the broadcast.
Changeup.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. And that was actually not too bad of a pitch. It was a on a lefty batter, and he kind of got him on the inside, like on the inside part of the plate. And the batter just took it out. Like it was actually a really good piece of hitting, but like that's to say that like the rest of the pitches were what I was describing before. So he gave up a couple doubles, I think, too, off the wall. So it wasn't just the home runs and then just simple base hits. Besides that, it was a lot of hard contact. So we saw a pretty strong spring out of him for the most part, really. I think that you had pointed out in the past, like something about his front shoulder flying open a little bit more and trying to like contain that, I guess, control his mechanics a little bit better. And I'm not astute enough to like see that in this outing specifically, but that's gonna be important for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an easy one for him to write off and, you know, blame the weather, blame the first start of the year, all that jazz. It's very important now. Just like, don't let it be a confidence destroyer. Keep throwing strikes, but, you know, trust yourself to throw better strikes than you did there. And, you know, one start doesn't mean that he's off the radar again. It just means that he's going to need some time here warming up. So,
but on the flip side of things, if he has one great start, that does mean that he is the number one prospect in the system.
We will be hyping it up, I promise.
All right, man. Anything else from Iowa before we transition here?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll just roll through the relievers a little bit just because, you know, we have some data. And actually, the one guy that I do want to shout out is the guy who showed up the best on the data this weekend was Manny Rodriguez. And he didn't even have a particularly great outing. But, you know, most of these guys this time of year, their velocity is a little bit down from their average last year because most guys are going to be throwing the hardest when it gets to summer. You know, their arm has gotten used to throwing every couple of days. It's easier to throw hard in warm weather. So I think Manny Rodriguez and maybe Anthony Kay are the only two guys who are showing velo up. And Manny was up to 98. He was throwing 91 mile per hour sliders. So, that was exciting to see. I'd love for him to pitch his way back up and to start getting the swings and misses. I mean, that's the big thing for him is like, you can throw hard, sure, but is it fooling a batter? And so I'm going to watch that really close. I'm happy for him.
I missed Cam's outing on Sunday. How did you get your eyes on him? How did he look in that outing?
Yeah, I mean he looked okay. It wasn't like quite as live as those like super, those super nasty spring training outings, but he did get up to 97. I think it was mostly, if I'm remembering right, like mostly 95s. But yeah, he got what he get? He got 4 whiffs in total, but the big thing to me was he got 2 whiffs on that slider and he only threw it 6 times. I mean, that pitch has definitely taken a step forward, probably a half grade better than it was last year. Maybe even a full grade. So, that's important. The Jeremiah Estrada had a nice 1-2-3 inning, but the stuff was a little down. So that'll be one to watch. Brian Baruki was probably the most dominant for the weekend. He pitched really well. And Anthony K is my guy, man. I mean, that dude,
yeah,
that dude could be in the major leagues right now getting outs. He had an outing on Sunday where I think he threw like 11 sliders, which is a new, he's trying that new sweeper this year. It was the pitch he used the most in that outing. So I like that he's embracing that. I think he could be that guy that comes up and proves to be the lefty that sticks in the pen.
You and Zumac could have a nerd off with Anthony K because you guys both dig him.
Oh, he's got that cut ride fastball that gets Greg all hot under the collar.
I want to wrap up. Not wrap up, but I want to get to the back part of this episode here. You spent, like I said, some time down in spring training again this year, and you had a great article over at Bleacher Nation about kind of some news and notes that you saw when you were down there, just kind of taking in some action on the backfields. I guess my first question is like, how was it? Did you love every second of it like always?
Yeah, it was really good. The weather wasn't as good as it normally is for the spring. So one of the days I was supposed to go out there, it rained and they were shut down. It was pretty cold most of the mornings going out there, which slowed me getting out there a little bit. But really fun. Good to see a friend of the show, Rich Biesterfeld. Always good to hang out with my guy Arizona Phil, the very sort of mythic legend that he is, and talk to him a little bit. So. Yeah, it's a great time. I think everybody that has a chance to go to Arizona should definitely at least spend just a little bit of time over there at the quad, the fields over there on the opposite side of the grounds of where the stadium is. It's really cool place. Really good to see just 180 minor leaguers just putting their work in, and they're all out there for you to see.
What's your typical strategy when you go there? Do you have a tradition that you go there, look at one particular position group, or what's your strategy, or do you just go and just watch a whole bunch of dudes?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest thing, so basically they organize it where it's they come out, they do stretches, then they do some of those drills that are not super fun to watch and not super telling, I mean, PFPs, but also just sort of the most basic, they're playing catch to warm up, things that don't tell you anything. So I tend to arrive on the later part of the morning, basically hoping to catch batting practice is a big one for me to see. And then they take a little lunch break, and then they come out and they play their games generally in the afternoon, which I think a lot of people go see the major league team at that time. And that's when the minor league guys play, is there at 1:00. But, that's the really cool time, because there's almost always 2 games happening at fields right next to each other, and you can just bounce back and forth one pitch to the next. I was watching Ryan Jensen throw a pitch, and 4 seconds later, other field, Peyton Remy throwing a pitch. And, I think I even texted you, Pete Crow Armstrong takes an at bat to my right, Kevin Alcantara takes an at bat to my left.
That's the dream. It's like when they had quad box on for the NCAA basketball tournament, but it's in real life. It's quad fields, literally.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. You had some good notes in that BN article, but the one that very clearly stood out to me the most is the BJ Murray news, right? I mean, you've been begging and pleading for the BJ Murray to second base move. Not that he's moved to second base, but he was getting some action over there, right?
Yeah, I saw a game where he played. When I walked up and they were still doing infield drills, he was at second base, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Like he should be getting a little practice there." And then they played the game, and he was actually, he played out there at second base for the game, and did not have to be. I'm trying to remember who was at third. Oh, it was Luis Vasquez at shortstop and Luis Verdugo at third. So I mean, you could have put any of those guys over at second base and moved Murray over to third. So I think it does tell you that he's going to get a little bit of action there this year. And to me, he's probably not a guy that's going to hit quite enough to be a corner guy in the major leagues. So the path that you need to take, like the most optimistic path to me would be second base works. And I think you could like view a future where he carves out a career there. But most likely the path that you're looking at is, he's a switch hitter. If you can get to like 5 positions of versatility, first, second, third, and then you play the outfield corners, I mean, that's just like your dream major league bench player.
Yeah. I mean, he got a lot of love from the broadcasters that I had on for the season previews. Max and Brendan both loved what they saw from BJ last year. And Sam, I think he said some good things about him too. So, all right, Owen Casey is. I think he's primed for a breakout, man. I think that like there's some serious power coming from this year. I've tried to talk about him as much as possible on the show so far. This is episode 14. I think the 13 episodes prior, I think I've probably mentioned Owen Casey, and I think it's worthwhile. I think a lot of attention has been thrown PCA's way for absolutely good reason, right? He's PCA, but we're forgetting that like he's not the only 20-year-old outfielder that's going to be in Double A Tennessee this year, right? Like Owen Casey is younger than PCA. He is going to be the youngest player on the Tennessee roster once that gets announced. And yeah, man, it's just I think that we should be throwing more hype Owen Casey's way, and I think that you saw some of that action down in Arizona, right?
Yeah, I mean, he just come back from the World Baseball Classic, which I think was a really good experience. I mean, had a couple big highlight performances from there, both with the bat and with the arm in the field. And the game that really stuck out that I watched him, he got 1 home run, but then there were 2 other balls that were darn close to home runs, one for a double, one that ended up getting caught. And it just seemed like, I wrote in the piece, like I saw Owen in the Arizona Fall League in October in person. He seemed real late on stuff. And, if you watch him, like, everyone loves the actual sort of mechanics of his swing when he's in motion, but I don't think like even the coaches particularly love how busy he is pre-swing. It's almost kind of like the way that Cody Bellinger is, where it's like when he's late, it really sort of sticks out to you that he's late on a pitch, because there was so much busyness before it. But Casey was timed up that whole time I was there, and if that's a guy that is really locked into his timing, out of the gate, then it's going to be really exciting because, like you said, if we have a 20-year-old in Double A who just starts doing damage, like those are the easiest and most fun guys to start hyping for the major league level, because when you're succeeding at the Double A level at a young age, like the odds that you end up working in the major leagues are much higher than they are for other prospects in other situations.
Were his load mechanics still the same, or like was he just on time more, or did he look different in his like pre-swing mechanics?
Yeah, I didn't see anything. I know our friend of the show, Aram Layton, posted a video when he was in the Arizona Fall League, and it was Owen in batting practice, and he'd cut out some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I went there, that stuff was still there. I think it's almost something he'll work on in the cage a little bit. Maybe it's something he'll bring out for 2 strikes a little bit, is cutting a little bit of that out. But I think he is sort of comfortable with a little bit of that wiggle. I don't think he's afraid of getting his hands, like, his hands move quite a bit from front to back right as he's about to start his swing. It's not something that they seem particularly worried about messing with right now.
It's interesting because I see it. If you guys are watching on YouTube, this is you get the full action here. I feel like he goes from this position here where he's like kind of like waggling his bat a little bit, right? I gotta figure out a way to describe this as I'm showing it. And then when it comes time to load, a lot of times he'll go out with it, back in, and then to like a load position. I don't know. And that just feels very like, and it's not a super big, it's not like, we're not talking a Jason Hayward type like real bad hitch. It's just like if you look really closely, you can kind of see that. And it hasn't seemed to affect him too awful much. But you're right. Like every once in a while, you're like, like maybe without that, it'd be just a whole lot more seamless. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he's also a guy that goes opposite field all the time. He really like had that look, and so that's always told me like, okay, there is some power to unlock to the pull side if he's catching balls a little sooner, and if maybe a little bit of just that quieting down happens and he catches a ball just like, I mean, we're talking the difference of 3 inches here of like, if you hit that ball 3 inches sooner, it might go out for a home run to right center instead of be a ball that the center fielder catches taking a few steps over to the left field side.
Baseball's wild, man. Baseball's wild. You mentioned that your guy that you noticed this year that might have gone through the biggest body transformation is Kevin Madej. Who was your guy? I feel like you always call out a guy. You remember who your guy last year was that was the biggest body transformation?
I
feel like I'm always looking for your tweets like, oh, like this guy looks different.
Yeah, I mean, it is something I always look for sure. And this year I didn't see as many examples, but I'm curious when you start to see him if you see it too. I mean, to me, the big difference is sort of like the middle third of his body is definitely just like it's getting older. He's getting muscle in his legs, and he's just thickening up a little bit. And I'm really curious to see what it does on the baseball field, because it could produce power, which he does show in batting practice, but has never really showed in games very well. He's never really hit the ball very hard in games.
Who needs coffee when you could just watch the development path of Kevin Madej? Because like the him as a hitter, if he taps into this power a little bit more this year, which is entirely possible, right? It's just like we have seen so many different versions of Kevin Madej at the plate in his 3 years of being in full season ball. It's crazy. It's so much fun.
Yeah, and I'll say the first time I saw him when I walked up to the backfields was they were doing drills, and it was Christian Hernandez at shortstop and Kevin Madej at third, which was almost more affecting because you're seeing a thicker Madej and he's playing third, and you're like, oh shoot, is shortstop off the table now? Are we starting to lose athleticism? And then I caught him a couple days later and he was playing shortstop, and I have no necessarily like reason to think that's off the table now, but it is worth pointing out that like a guy's body changes, it's not always necessarily a good thing. And so it's something to watch more than it's something that like has me excited.
What's your Christian Hernandez update? You got anything? Give the people what they want.
Yeah, so Christian, I was very happy. The day after I left, Christian had a video that went around on Twitter of catching a home run that looked sweet. And what I was thinking about him was, how we always hear, like if you read a prospect website and they're describing a top prospect, one of the things they'll always say, and like you don't even really understand, like no one understands what it means, it's just a great word to put around a prospect, is barrel accuracy or has a feel for the barrel. Like that's just something like we throw at hitting prospects. Christian Hernandez does not have that at all. Like whatever that is, Christian Hernandez is inaccurate with his barrel. He doesn't have a particular feel for it, but when he catches it on the barrel, the ball goes super far. And so like that was like I wanted to write a bullet and I didn't in the Bleacher Nation piece, and I was frustrated with myself for forgetting it. But I wanted to be like, all right, I'm gonna finally counterbalance the 76,000 examples of this guy's got a great feel for the barrel with one example of like a guy I really like that yet like at his tender age of like late teens does not have a feel for the barrel.
That's incredible. He does not have a feel for the barrel. Well, I mean, we just got as we're recording this, we just got the Myrtle Beach opening day roster earlier today. Yeah. By the time you guys are listening, we might already have Tennessee and South Bend, but it was weird that we only got Myrtle Beach today. That was weird to me. But
I was not ready for it.
Yeah, I was not either. Christian Hernandez is on that. He'll be the opening day starting shortstop for the Myrtle Beach Pelicans, and likely the man at shortstop probably all year long, honestly. I mean, I think that seeing a full year from him at Myrtle is probably the most likely scenario.
I think that the Cubs are very, very interested in having Buddy Bailey ride Christian Hernandez's butt this entire year in like a really positive way. I mean, Buddy's like, he's a legend. I think he's really good at instilling good work habits in guys. And I think that that's really going to help this crew in Myrtle Beach. And, I think that's a fun mix of guys. Like, got a lot of pitchers that we drafted last year there, and then a lot of like high upside bats all throughout that lineup. So that'll be a fun team.
Yeah. That could be really interesting with Buddy and that roster. Two more guys I want to talk about. One is Reggie Preciado, because I feel like we talk about Christian Hernandez being like that mystery man, right? We've heard about him for so long, but we haven't actually seen him on MILB TV. We haven't seen him in action. Versus Reggie Preciado, like we saw a decent amount of Preciado last year, in between injuries and stuff like that in Myrtle Beach, but he still really like very much so feels like a mystery man, just because like we didn't get to see like the real Preciado, I feel like last year. Did you get an eye on him down in Arizona?
Yeah, so when I come back, I do not like to say negative things that I see about guys because it's so early. They don't necessarily mean anything. So when I went to Arizona before the 2022 season, I saw a lot of Preciado there, and it was really bad. And I did not really write about it, but like the batting practices were rough, and the coaches were in with him breaking down his swing at like a really sort of like basic level. Like every part of the swing on both sides was getting work in batting practice sessions. And it felt like, we were just like, it was really sort of basic stuff. And I was not super shocked to see him struggle like he did last year. This year, I will say it was much better. Like he was like one of the guys. He belonged in like every group that I saw him in. He's hitting balls harder than a lot of the guys in his group every time. Swinging a good stick. He looks a little more filled out than he did last year. I think it's going to be pretty much all third base for him this year. I think there's more positive vibes. I think there's more reason for optimism that he's going to like hang offensively at this level. And then I think we'll just know a ton more in 4 months about what he could be than we do right now.
Yeah. That seemed like a really good example last year of like missing that short season baseball where now Myrtle Beach, now low A is that like introductory into actually competitive games. Not that the Arizona Complex League isn't competitive, it's just different. And that's a good example of like, had there been a short season team, I'm sure that Preciado would have stayed back in Arizona and then gone to Eugene and all that good stuff. But just because of the new situation, I say new now. This is the third year of this,
right?
So not exactly new, but it still feels a little newish. But he would have been a good example of that.
Yeah, and I think I said this on the show one other time is like that low A level last year had so many college pitchers in it out of the gate, and Myrtle Beach faced some really tough ones. So it really felt like an unfair assignment, and we saw that bear out.
The last guy I want to talk about is maybe the guy with the best vibes, from what I can tell. I don't know. Maybe you can confirm it. Andy, is it Garriola? I'm gonna need to wait. I'm gonna need to talk to Sam Wiederhaft about that once the game starts.
Yeah, I mean, our accent, this part of the country, Garriola. I think we'll be going with that. Chicago.
Andy Garriola. I remember seeing a picture of Andy that Rich Biesterfeld posted last year. I think it was I think it was after he got drafted. He was down in Arizona, and he had the Nick Castellanos look going, right? He had the no shirt underneath the jersey. He had the jersey unbuttoned down like 3 buttons with the chains and the arm sleeve. Like just the vibes were immaculate. What did you see from Andy in Arizona down there?
Yeah, he's got that look down. He's still, he has not found a button that he wants to do yet. And so it's nice. I mean, you mentioned Castellanos, but the guy that I walked up and I was like, oh, and I just watched the World Baseball Classic game the night before with the U.S. And I was like, oh my God, Pete Alonso is here at Cubs camp. And then got a little closer and I was like, no, it's this day 3 Cubs draft pick that looks like oddly similar to Pete. I mean, he's not yet quite as filled out, but I mean, he's he's more filled out than anyone else on the A-ball fields, I'll tell you that. And a guy that got a lot of buzz for, his batting practice home runs, has a ton of power. And also like really looks like Alonso at the plate. He sort of does that a kind of relatively deep crouch, keeps his hands really low with sort of a straight bat up. So it looks just like Pete. And I don't know, just a guy like I'd written this super long honorable mentions list on my Cubs prospect list and did not include him, one of the last cuts. And then I saw him and I was like, darn it. Definitely a guy that could finish the year as a top 50 prospect in the system if he just like comes out and, leads that Myrtle Beach team. And or he did make Myrtle. No, is he going? Oh, so he's going. He's going to. He's on Myrtle Beach.
He's on Myrtle Beach because that Myrtle Beach outfield is going to be. You got Parker Chavers, you got Christian Franklin, and you got Andy Garriola, which is a super interesting outfield.
Yeah. So if that guy like comes out and leads the team in home runs for 6-8 weeks, moves up to South Bend and still has success, like he's gonna get on the radar because he looks like a major leaguer in a uniform. I'll tell you that.
In the least surprising news of the century, he was drafted out of, you guessed it, Old Dominion University. I'm curious about like your thoughts because I feel like a lot of like those round draft picks, like day 3, like that around that round of draft pick, it reminds me of like this Jacob Wetzel type mold of player, where like I think that Jacob Wetzel has shown he is valuable in a lot of different ways on a baseball field. He plays really good outfield defense. He can really show off some pop every once in a while. Absolutely takes his walks, but I wouldn't really consider Jacob Wetzel like a high upside type guy. You think Andy Garriola is in that same mold? Is he different than a guy like Jacob Wetzel?
I think he has more offensive upside. I think, probably in the field, it's going to look slightly similar to Wetzel. But I think the like top end power is on another level. Wetzel hits the ball really hard. His exit velo numbers are good, but he doesn't, between being slightly smaller and, not elevating it quite as much, like the power doesn't play in the way that I think Garriola's will.
Yeah, like I'm just trying to like rack my brain for some names. I think like Scott McKeon gives off that vibe to a certain degree, where like he was an undrafted guy, obviously out of Coastal Carolina, but like it's a college signing, college draft pick that could probably play like those type of guys that can play in high A, like right out the gate. Like I think Andy Garriola could probably play at South Bend and like kind of hold his own,
I mean, the real example of this player is Jake Slaughter. I mean, Jake Slaughter was this player and then has reached sort of a level above that.
Thank you. That's what I was going for, was that actually. Yeah, but honestly, that's a wild kind of Myrtle Beach outfield. A very old Myrtle Beach outfield, really.
Yeah, I think maybe we're not going to be as like overwhelmed out of the gates with the Myrtle Beach team this year as last year. I think it'll be a team that really does well early on.
All right, buddy. Anything else you got from Arizona?
No, I don't think so.
All right. We'll go ahead and wrap up the show. I want to wrap up, and I did not warn you about this, so I apologize. I want to maybe give a shout out to whether it's something baseball related, whether it's the upcoming games, a particular player, something like that. But I want to give a shout out to kind of wrap up the episodes, and didn't know if you had anything in mind or want me to go first, because I have something in mind.
You go first.
Okay. All right. I actually this came to mind, and I thought that this is something that might be good throughout these episodes moving forward. But a buddy of mine, Jeff Lindgren, who I played high school baseball with, I grew up with, one of my best friends. He actually made his MLB debut today for the Miami Marlins. He was supposed to come in relief. He got called up today. He was supposed to come in relief later in the game. Johnny Cueto was on the mound for the Marlins, and he got hurt in the second inning. He threw one inning, came back out for the second inning, gave up a bunch of runs, and got hurt. And so Jeff was thrown into the action in that second inning of work. So he had to warm up on the big league, like on the mound in front of I guess it's in Miami, so not a whole lot of fans, but your warm up on the mound as opposed to in the bullpen because you get all the time in the world to warm up if you're following an injury. But yeah, so he made his MLB debut. Really, really cool. I played with him, like I said, like from a super young age all the way through high school. He went and played at Illinois State University over here, and yeah, just super, super exciting to see his kind of come up through the system because he was never really a top prospect. He was never even really a top recruit coming out of high school or anything. And so to see him earn his way to a big league team after all these years is really, really cool. Really happy for him. Want to give a special shout out to Jeff Lindgren. If you guys are looking for another player to become a fan of, Jeff Lindgren on the Miami Marlins.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, you know what I'm going to shout out because we haven't mentioned it yet is the collective bargaining agreement between Major League Baseball and the minor league baseball players through the Player Association was signed and ratified this week. And, I think that it's really good news. It's, it's mostly, I think, somewhere like 250% raises for most of the guys at most levels. These guys are getting paid in spring training finally, which I don't think most people knew was not happening for decades and decades, was minor leaguers donating their spring training month for free. And, a continued sort of now like written firm commitment that a lot of the things like, good housing, special housing for players with families, special housing situations for players with pregnant wives, things like that really matter on the margins have been addressed. And, I think will continue to be addressed as like the holes of this collective bargaining agreement are discovered and, that stuff will happen. It's a really positive step forward for the game. And I've given Rob Manfred and the commissioner's office so much of a hard time over the years and will continue to do that and, want more for these players already. But it's more of a commitment to minor leaguers than any commissioner ever before has given and acknowledged. And, I'll tip my cap at that.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better. Really, I mean, it's one of those things where we could dig into the line by line of what these players are getting that's improved over what their situations were before. But like really what it comes down to is I am so happy for the players. Like I am so happy for these guys. I don't think that it's ultimately where it could be or where it should be, but it's a hell of a lot better. And I'm just happy that their situations have improved this much. I think that you and I talking with these players and knowing some of their personal experiences and how much of a struggle it is, like this is terrific. I couldn't be happier for these dudes. Yeah, that's huge. I'm glad you mentioned that because I had forgot to mention it on the podcast.
Yeah, we all want to see baseball played at the highest level. That's, why we're a fan of it. And the way you get the highest level possible is if guys that become professionals at 18 to 22 years old that have earned the right to be professionals are actually able to do it exclusively for a living and focus on it as a 12-month-a-year job because they're just going to get better quicker. The level at every level of the minor leagues will improve. And ultimately that will mean that, 10 years down the line, the level and quality of baseball being played in the majors will improve as well. And that's something I think we can all just be happy is in the pipeline.
Amen, brother. Amen. All right. You want to go ahead and plug yourself as we wrap this up here?
Yeah, I'm back at Bleacher Nation this season. Got the prospect list finally out a couple weeks ago. And we'll be just diving into dailies. I mean, I think this first month of the season's fun because, all we're doing is just trying to find stuff that's new with these guys. What looks a little different, what's been added, what tools up. And so I think that's really going to inform, my writing at Bleacher Nation and, what we talk about on this podcast in the weeks to come.
I was off social media and I was off Twitter. I was off like reading Cubs stuff for a while there as you were posting your prospect list. And so the way I read your prospect list was the entire thing all one night. I literally sat down and I read every post. I read one through 50 and then all of the honorable mentions all in one night, and highly recommend that. That was honestly, that was a lot of fun. I
feel
enjoyed
like I need to send your wife an apology card or something.
it was terrific. So you can find me on Twitter at Out of the Vines. Right now, I haven't been doing a whole lot of writing. I did write the Tennessee Smokies preview, which was one of the most fun previews I have ever written. Honestly, it was one of the most fun previews I've ever written in my decade-ish of writing about Cubs prospects.
Ridiculous team.
Just a stacked roster, man. The rotation is so stacked. The outfield, the bullpen was even more stacked than I thought it was going into writing that. Even after talking with BK on the show about the bullpen. So go give that a read. As always, you can find this podcast, anywhere where you listen to podcasts. You can find the video version of it on YouTube at the Northside Bound YouTube account, on Apple, on Spotify, on Stitcher, on all those websites that I've never even seen before in my entire life. Go check it out. We will be back in your ears in one short week with more prospect, more minor league action with all 4 affiliates in play. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you soon.
Go Cubs.